My goodness. Absolutely brutal performance. First, let me talk about the positives. That way, if there's any lefty that's watching that, notice the lefties don't handle things well. You see like with left-wing streamer Destiny, when the news cycle doesn't go their way, all of a sudden they're saying you're effing around and finding out if you happen to get murdered in an assassination attempt at a Trump rally, etc., etc. They don't handle things when you are pro-establishment and you're used to all of our institutions being on your side. You don't really handle any perceived losses. So let me start off for their mental health, right? And give two positives to this. The one is a legitimate positive from something that Kamala Harris said. Okay, we'll give three. The first is, and this is the least positive of what I'm going to say here, is she did do a good job of attacking Donald Trump. Unfortunately, as we'll get to when I talk about the appearance overarchingly, I don't think that's going to change any minds. At this point, everybody knows that the Democrats have attacked Donald Trump for 8 years. They're aware of the attacks. The reason that Kamala Harris is out there right now is because, well, we'll get to exactly, I don't think things are going as well for them as they would like. And so they can't use their just sort of hide behind closed door strategy. And so what people really want to know, what they didn't get out of the Kamala-Trump debate, even though I thought she won that debate, they didn't get a clear picture of who is Kamala Harris. How will your presidency be different than your vice presidency? What would you have done different than Joe Biden? Why have you seemed to have changed so many positions? Those are the lingering questions that people had, and this was her chance to go to a place like Fox News, where there might be people that, traditionally aren't necessarily Democrats or they're centrist, and they're weighing whether or not they want to vote for a person who they don't personally like in Donald Trump or a person who they don't know what they would be like in Kamala Harris. I don't think she did any favors on that, but seeing as how we're talking about the good things, I do think she did a good job of hitting the talking points about why Trump's dangerous, why she thinks it's dangerous, why people connected to Trump, such as Mike Pence and his former chief of staff, have said that they don't think he's qualified to be president. So she got to those talking points. That's a very small upside for her. The legitimate upside, and maybe I'll get some pushback on this, I do think at one point Brett Baer talked about the names of some of the people that were killed by illegals such as Lake and Riley, and I think that Kamala Harris did a very good job of seeming empathetic to those people and their families. Now you might say, well, that's a low bar, that's easy to do. Yeah, but sometimes it's easy to come off as callous when you're defending your record and someone talks about specific individuals. For example, if you were in an administration where soldiers died, and an interviewer asks you, oh, what do you say to the family of the soldier that died that blames you for their death? You might think that your policies were tremendous that led to that soldier dying, and it's just unfortunate anytime you order a military decision that someone may die, even if you think you made the right decision. So it's easy to be combative and say, well, I did nothing wrong. And I think that although Kamala Harris isn't saying, yes, you're right, my fault, she does seem to be very empathetic towards the family members of the people that died. And again, I'd say this with all honesty, I do think that came across as at least sounding very genuine. Is it genuine? I don't know. But it came across as saying, I feel terrible, of course. And it's easy to say those things, I know. It's not like, she reinvented the wheel or anything like that. But I'll give her credit for that. I really will. So that's it. That's all positive that I have to say. The only other thing I'll say the positive is just surrounding the interview and not the interview itself. I don't know how much of an impact this will have. Much like the debates, the J.D. Vance debate, where he crushed Tim Walz, will this actually change ballots? Will this actually lead to people? It may. It absolutely may, but it may not as well. That's it. That's the positives I have from this. Now, for me, as someone who legitimately wants the best candidate to win, I'm all for as much exposure as possible in an unfiltered as way as possible to the American people for all of our candidates in the primary season, in the general election season. That's different than the strategic gamesmanship of how you set up interviews, etc. Let me give you an example. If I'm Trump's team, I'm not doing any mainstream media interview. In fact, if I'm a Republican, period, unless you're someone who's incredibly talented at it, such as a J.D. Vance, a Ron DeSantis, a Vivek Ramaswamy, I think that the appropriate response for any run-of-the-mill Republican, conservative, populist, any of those groups, libertarian, is to completely shun places like CBS that have showed they are merely propagandists for the establishment. That's who they are. So it is not going in to a adversarial press relationship anymore. It is literally going into propagandists that are working as surrogates for your opposition. This was brutal. If you haven't had the time to watch the whole thing, it's only a half an hour. My goodness. Absolutely brutal performance. Far exceeded my expectations for how bad she would be. Absolutely terrible. She does not do anything to alleviate fears or questions that people have of what will Kamala Harris's policies be? How will she differ? If she's running as someone of change, how is it different? What would she have done differently than what happened in the Harris-Biden administration? Not only does she not do that, she is instantly combative. Like instantly. She is attempting to filibuster. It's like she knows from the first question about immigration, oh shit, I don't have good answers for anything, so I'm just going to stream Trump, 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 and try to talk for 15 minutes uninterrupted, forcing Bret Baier to step in and say, but wait a minute, let's get back to the question, so she could say, you're interrupting me. Let's talk about the specifics. So her strategy was to filibuster. That was it. Filibuster and just be like, but Trump's horrible. Bret Baier, in his last sort of point that he makes before this wraps up, which took about a half an hour, he says, listen, we're well aware, we've heard you and the Democrats talk about how bad Donald Trump, you and your policies and what you would do. And he's basically all but saying, you didn't answer shit. You just complained about Donald Trump and filibustered. Then in the after show, Bret Baier's talking to sort of some of the other personalities at Fox, and he makes the point. He's like, I understand people are going to say that I interrupted, but at what point? I've never in my career really been in an interview setting like this. Normally you could get a word in edgewise and you could redirect towards the question. She wasn't having it. She was just, I'm going to keep going until I force you to interrupt and then complain about you interrupting. So let's go. I don't have verbatim what was said. I tried. You could go to my X feed and you can see that I was posting out as the interview was going on. So go there and check out exactly what I was saying. Yeah, hit the like button. Thanks so much. But I did write down the major topics, and hopefully things will come to my head as we're going. So the very first question that's asked is about the border. And basically Bret Baier asks a simple question. Do you regret, given what we've seen at the border, the crisis, do you regret immediately coming into office and you and Biden rescinding 90-something of Trump's executive orders, like basically on day one? Now, Kamala Harris starts off with some sort of answer, right? And she says, we had a bill ready to go on day one. Okay. Now, this is an argument that I've heard people try to make previously. But there's two problems with this argument. One, it's basically an amnesty bill. It was a bill that they wanted to push forth that basically would have offered amnesty to like 10 million illegals. So that would be the equivalent if Trump was like, we're like, there's a problem with too many immigrants coming in. And they're like, well, let's all give them, all the ones that are here that came illegally, the right to vote. Let's give them all amnesty. Oh, you didn't like that? Well, then the border's your fault. In other words, they pushed through a bill that they knew wouldn't solve the central issue, and in fact would make it worse. It would provide an incentive for more illegals to come because they'd say, holy shit, they're giving amnesty out now. So it actually, instead of being a tough one, of course it said, and we'll give more money to Border Patrol if we give everyone amnesty. So it's just laughable that this was going to do things seriously. But the other and more important point, and this is what Bret Baier, he tries to make both these points as she sort of starts talking about this talking point, You had a Democrat House and Senate. The Democrats refused to even bring this bill up for a vote. So you failed. You were unable to whip the votes in your own party to even bring this bill to the floor. So given that, how could you use that as an excuse for rescinding the executive orders of Trump, which created the border crisis? This was a disaster. This Kamala interview was a disaster. I recommend all of you watch it. And you will see the normal gaslighters that'll say, Kamala did great. It was an ambush. The same people that for 4 years of the Trump presidency, every time he got up to the podium, where he did press conference after press conference, he would stand up there for an hour, unscripted, and just members of the press screaming at him, answer every one of them. They were cool with that. I don't see what the problem is. The press is very fair. That's their job. But one time, Kamala Harris goes on Fox News, and it's like, this was an ambush. It was an ambush. Absolutely hilarious. Any other specifics that people had? I thought it was bad. I thought stylistically she did bad. She was super combative right out of the gate. She was all but yelling. Again, you might say, but Rob, sometimes you yell a lot and stuff. Yeah, but I'm not the one running on happiness and vibes and joy, and that my opponent yells too much. And I have substantive answers to the things I'm talking about, unlike Kamala Harris. She did terribly. She would have been better off not doing this interview. It's literally that simple. And the people that are going to try to gaslight you, oh, she did great, this was wonderful, are full of shit. And they know it. They know that it was not good. They know it. You see, that's the difference between me and them. I'm not saying I'm always right, and you may disagree with me at times, but I'll tell you, I have every incentive in the world. I'm being completely transparent. I'm voting for Donald Trump. I'm doing my best to help Donald Trump win. Trump wasn't my first pick in the primary. I was transparent and honest with that. He won the primary. I'm pushing for him. So I had every incentive in the world when Trump debated Kamala Harris to say, oh yeah, Trump won. I didn't. I took heat from my own audience. All I could do is be honest. That's it. I've analyzed debates all the time where I'm like, I think the left winger won this debate. These people are so bad. How many of them were saying Tim Walz won that debate? Laugh. There were people of them trying to say that Joe Biden won that debate against Donald Trump. A debate that was so historically bad that it forced him out. And there were people saying, actually, Biden won. Even won that blatant. The Walz-Vance debate wasn't much better for Tim Walz. And yet, I think Walz won. So are you surprised? I would love to see a Venn diagram of the people that said that Tim Walz won that debate that are going to say, Kamala did great today. I'd love to see that Venn diagram. I bet it'd be a perfect circle.